Thanks for joining us on Not Boring CEs, where we don't think you should be bored to death while getting your continuing ed. Keep listening here, then hop over to notboringces.com to get all your online CE credits. All right, y'all, let's get to learning. Emily Maynard is a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. Her clinical work focuses on supporting people who have experiences with religious trauma, harmful faith and family dynamics, high control groups, and dysfunctional Christian workplaces. Emily earned an MA in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University and has 5 years of experience as a therapist. She's certified in EMDR therapy through EMDRIA. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to Not Boring CEs. I'm your host, Allison Pereira. I'm here with Emily Maynard, and we are going to be talking about recognizing and working with people who may need to escape harmful Christian communities and workplaces. I want to go ahead and say at the jump, we are not saying all Christian communities are needing to be left and save people from them and all that. These are just the ones that are, and we'll get into it, but are harmful to our clients and definitely not the kinds of environments we want the people we care about in. So thank you so much for being here, Emily. I'm excited to talk.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah. So maybe can we start with any sort of like definitions or any laying the groundwork that we may need to do? Can we start there?
Yeah, I think definitions are really important because, like you said, we're really comfortable with the idea that religion can be something that really helps people, or
Mm-hmm.
faith can be something that even helps people in their clinical outcomes. It can be a tool that, if the client wants it, can be really powerful and important to allow in the therapy room.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something where the client has experienced religious harm in some way, they've had a faith transition, bringing that into the room can cause clinical harm or even slow down a client's progress as a distraction. So what I'm talking about here are something that's been called adverse religious experiences. And there's actually a religious trauma institute that brings together research and training with a clinical perspective on some of these issues. So they define adverse religious experiences as any experience of religious belief, practice, or structure that undermines an individual's sense of safety or autonomy and or negatively impacts their physical, social, emotional, relational, or psychological well-being. So that's a really broad definition, but I think the point to focus in on is that we're talking about things that cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a lot of different things. And, we know with interpersonal neurobiology and that some things can cause harm to one person and another person could experience them and be totally fine.
Right, right. And I think we should acknowledge this can happen across all faith traditions, as well as agnostic and atheist realms or ways or philosophies. I just want to, I don't want people to be offended that we are picking on Christianity. So, and that's me
Yeah, that's
speaking
the
from the Bible Belt over here. So,
right.
yeah.
That's my clinical focus. So that's where I can
Mhm.
speak the best from. But
Yeah.
certainly harmful dynamics can happen in any kind of group or organization or relationship.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other definitions or groundwork we should lay?
Yeah, another one that I think is really important is the understanding of religious trauma, because that's a phrase that I feel like is coming up more in clinical conversations. And I'm really excited about that because I think it's a really important thing to define. And maybe there might be more and more people in your communities seeking that sort of care for trauma that they experience or that they're kind of carrying in some way from a religious group. So, again, the Religious Trauma Institute says that religious trauma is the physical, emotional, or psychological response to religious beliefs, practices, or structures that is an experience by an individual as overwhelming, disruptive, and has lasting adverse effects on a person's physical, mental, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another phrase that I think is really important to know is this idea of religious deconstruction. Because again,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of content about that out there. And I think some of you might be seeing more and more clients who are bringing those ideas in and wanting to sort of use therapy or clinical spaces to deconstruct some of the ways that they grew up or some of the beliefs that they used to hold and how those might have had positive or negative effects on their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So deconstruction is like the process of re-examining or changing your once held beliefs And this can involve a change in your religious community or practice. It can be a primarily intellectual process, or it can be a primarily social process, something that shifts in your life or family. And that can cause a lot of challenges, particularly for people who were raised in a more tightly controlled group or a fundamentalist type of experience of that faith. That's where we see a lot more social impacts, a lot more anxiety and depression, a lot more relationship issues if now, they've left that faith group, or they're still engaging with family or friends who are really invested in a certain set of beliefs or a certain set of community practices.
Yeah. And I think about how these phrases that get picked up across social media, often they end up morphing and changing depending on who's saying them. So I love that this is what this means, because I can also see clients coming in and thinking it has a different flavor or it's slightly different in some way. So it is probably also good to have this definition in your head, but to also ask clients, tell me what you mean by deconstruct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other things that we should define or clear up before we hop in?
I think that's what I have for definitions. The really important things to know are that the harm is unique to the client, not necessarily to the group. It might even be really hard to sit across with somebody who was harmed by a group that you as a clinician are a part of and have found beneficial and have found helpful in other clinical conversations. But
Yeah.
I know that I hear stories of harm that happens when a clinician brings in a faith practice or a person, and really pushes that on a client, even in the form of homework. So I'm thinking of somebody I know who said that their clinician, they were treating some mental health issues, and their clinician told them, "Oh, you need more positivity, in your life. Maybe sign up for this pastor's daily newsletter of encouragement."
Mm.
And my friend was like, "No, I'm not going to do that. Like, religious harm is a part of my background. You know this. Like, why are you telling me that I need to engage with like your religion in order to feel better about this
Mm-hmm.
issue?" So I think it's really important to, if you live in an area where you're likely to engage with clients of faith, you can certainly have some knowledge of how to work with those clients well, but make sure you have some secular options or some homework that doesn't involve religious practice or belief at all,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're trying to be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking like there are probably multiple groups of people, but I'm putting them into two categories right now that may come into your practice to see you. And they're clients coming in who are like, I want to deconstruct. I'm realizing I don't believe what I once believed, and I need to kind of sort through that or the fallout of that. And then the people who may be in these situations that are harmful and they're not recognizing it yet. How do you help clients recognize if they're in like a high control religious environment that is hurting them?
Yeah, I think those cases are always a little bit trickier because you have to move a little bit slower. The same
Mhm.
way that if somebody was in a dysfunctional relationship or maybe an abusive relationship and they weren't really recognizing that yet because it was
Mhm.
so normal to them,
Right.
that's what I see is people who were raised in religious contexts and had that shape all of their development, all of their early relationships, maybe their family structure and how they engage with their family. Like, religion was everywhere and it was normal to them.
Right.
um, in the same way that people who experience childhood abuse in different ways have to make sense of those processes, like biologically to survive, we sort
Mhm.
of are prone to make it our fault or to think maybe if we just do something better, this bad thing wouldn't happen. And I see that a lot in people who say, "Oh, maybe I have a little bit of, religious harm happened to me in this one area," but they're not really thinking about some of the big picture ways they're experiencing the harm. They're showing up with symptoms,
Mhm.
but they haven't made those connections yet. I think it's really important to just sort of offer some information and say, "Well, it's really interesting because when I see these type of symptoms in some other people, they really trace them back to their religious upbringing. Is that something that feels like it might fit for you?"
Mhm.
Because so many of these people have grown up in environments where they were told what to believe or experience or think. I think it's extra important to make sure the client is only moving as fast as the client can go and wants to go at that time.
Mhm. And I think about like some of the messages even around questioning things that people grow up in of like, don't question, don't ask these questions. Like faith is like, that's the definition of faith, basically, which is not accurate.
Yeah.
And there are some environments in which questions are encouraged, but I think particularly those where questions are not encouraged, it also keeps you from asking yourself and checking in with
Mhm.
yourself, like just cutting your own narrative off in a way that
Yeah.
probably leaks into other areas of life as well.
Mhm. Yeah, for these clients, they need just a little bit of space at a time. They need just a little bit of psychoeducation that, hey, that, sounds like that environment was really hard to grow up in,
Mm-hmm.
and there's these big narratives of like, no, 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 it was great. It was wonderful. I felt connected to God. Like, this is what my family's always believed. Maybe generations of my family have always believed these things. And allowing someone even a breath or a little bit of space away from those ideas can be really powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also going to bring in a lot of really harmful emotions. There's a lot of grief and loss around these topics that I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if people are always clued into, because any kind of shift does feel like a loss, not just existentially of a belief, but usually the hardest part is socially. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does this mean for all of my loved ones? What does this
Mm-hmm.
mean for my family? What does this mean for how I relate to all these people when my whole life I've only related to these people in this way with this thing in common?
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming like these folks are probably not showing up to your office when you specialize in like deconstruction and these kinds of things. They're showing up with burnout or being a stressed out mom or these other kinds of things in other people's practices who don't necessarily have the experience you have around this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I can see like the curiosity, like always, that's our job, right? Like always coming from curiosity and also making sure that you have some knowledge, which hopefully the C will provide,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can kind of know it when you see it, and gently wade in with folks who may need to explore that a little more than they have in their lives.
Right. I'm always curious how people assess or include information about religious background or religious upbringing in their intakes or in their early conversations. I think depending on where you are in the country, it might be assumed that that's everyone kind of shares similar faith
Mm-hmm.
backgrounds. Or it might be, I mean, I'm in Southern California, so I would say the assumption here more is like, oh, we don't even need to ask about that because it's not
Hmm.
something that feels so important here.
Right.
But the way we know that the way that our clients grow up has so many impacts on their lives now. And that's something that I don't want clinicians to be afraid of asking about, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was positive or negative or just neutral. You have some more information about maybe how to help that client move forward in their life, get more of what they want, heal their mental illness, or just learn how to tolerate it a little bit better.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the difference in how therapists approach and their curiosity in maybe Southern California versus like Provo, Utah. And
Mm-hmm.
like just doing everything you can to be as safe and curious as humanly possible for somebody to disclose whatever comes up. But how when you're in an environment where like Southern California, where is you're not amongst a community of people who are all expecting you to continue to believe the same thing you might have at one time versus in Provo, it would be really hard if you were LDS and decided you no longer believe that when everyone around you is, it feels like everyone around you is expecting that.
Yeah.
Or in some of the rural areas in the South, here where I live. So yeah, it's interesting, the different dynamics and how important it is to take that context into account for like your client's experience and how to
Yeah.
show up as a clinician.
I recommend asking early, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it- even if it's even in your intake paperwork, do you have any experience with religion that feels important for me to know about?
Mm-hmm.
Clients who don't want to talk about that will just say no and move on, or they'll just leave that part of the form blank. But
Mm-hmm.
clients who, same way with, I think, opening up conversations about sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Religion can be something that is, people worry about if they're allowed to talk about in therapy, or if they're maybe even like, if they might say something that would offend you as their
Right.
clinician. and giving them that permission early that like, hey, I can handle these conversations about topics that are hard to talk about in other areas can
Mm-hmm.
be really powerful in helping people realize like where they are and that some of the places they've been in might be harmful. There are
Mm-hmm.
places in the country where religious institutions or universities or groups or organizations are one of the main employers in that city or in that
Mm.
area.
Right.
And I think that's something that's really important as clinicians to keep an eye on is where somebody works and what commitments they might have had to make in order to work there or to stay working there
Mm-hmm.
might be one of the pieces that gets in people's way as they try to manage other symptoms.
Right. Well, and I think that there is also a possibility of being offended as a clinician, depending on your own perspective, your own biases, your own issues around religion. Um, can we talk some about that, about how our own belief system can really help or hinder in these conversations with clients?
Yeah, that's so important because I think religion, whether it's a part of your life or not, has these powerful influences to shape more than just beliefs about, a deity or an afterlife. Usually religions also come with a lot of social rules. Like, well, this is how you be a good person. You follow these tenets, you have these gender roles that you follow, you engage with, sex or purity in certain ways. So
Mhm.
even when we're talking, maybe even political, right? There's certainly
Mhm.
religions that include political action in some way, or political perspectives. So, and that's all the stuff that clients are bringing in anyway,
Right.
relationships, work. So I think it's really important to sort of know where you stand and then be able to learn how to really tolerate people expressing something that's very different from you. I mean, I think that's the countertransference or the reactions that we all have to deal with clinically about so many ways that our clients live that we do not support or that we're actively trying to help them out of. But knowing maybe your own triggers or your own points of like sensitivity as they come up, and then noting those down so that you can do your own reflection or your own therapy around like, I had this big reaction when a client talked about leaving their faith and how
Mhm.
much better they feel now. Like, I don't really know what to do with that,
Right.
would be something that I think might be really helpful, that you're probably going to have big reactions.
Mhm.
Or, if your religious upbringing has said divorce is not an option, and you're working with a client who's experienced divorce or is in the middle of divorce or contemplating divorce, I wonder what that would feel like for you to know in advance and
Mhm.
learn how to tolerate better and how to stay present for the client's needs rather than just your own ideas about marriage or family or faith practice.
Yeah, or if a referral out to a colleague would be a better option for that client too, depending on your own reflection and like, can you, from your own value system, support someone through a divorce? Or is you faking that going to ultimately cause harm to your client? Similarly to if you're of a faith that doesn't believe in or approve of like the LGBTQ community,
Mhm.
for instance. I would love for you
Yeah.
to examine what comes up for you around that. But for the client's sake, I would prefer for you to refer them to somebody who doesn't have to work through the stuff to help them.
Mhm. Yeah, our clients deserve really good treatment.
Mhm.
And if there's anything interfering with that you don't feel like you can get a handle on within a session or two, or that you don't have some really good support about working through, I think that is a great case to refer to one of your like amazing networked clinicians or colleagues. Like, I think it's really important to have people in your network who could provide the services that your clients are looking for. So
Mhm.
even if hey, faith is really important to this client, I'm not able to ask the right questions to help them integrate it well. Like, it seems like it's becoming a barrier. Refer to a clinician who openly includes that in their practice, right? As long as it's part of
Mhm.
the informed consent, the client knows what they're getting into and that they believe that would be helpful to their treatment, it is ethical to include in treatment if a client wants that sort of support. So knowing
Yeah.
that, hey, there's a really good Christian counseling center, I think they might be able to give you more of the treatment you're looking for. Let's do that. Hey, LDS Family Services like has great options to support you and to include this.
Mhm.
Or to say, you know what, I think there might be a better clinician from a secular perspective that might be a better fit for you, since
Mhm.
this keeps coming up in therapy. Those
Yeah,
are all great ways to hand off a client to a better provider for them.
right, right. I'm thinking about the warning signs, I guess, for the clinicians who don't specialize in this. What are some warning signs that somebody's religion may be causing them harm?
Some of the biggest warning signs that I see are confusion and then anxiety or fear type responses. So when I think of confusion, I think about people who say, I'm doing everything right, like I'm following all the rules, but I still don't feel like I never feel like I'm doing the right thing, or I'm not really ever getting better. And in any of those questions, like it becomes a little bit of a clinical puzzle. Like, what's going on? Is there something like physical that's impacting? Is there something like what sort of referrals might be helpful? And so I think of a question like, well, tell me a little bit about how you grew up and the kinds of experiences that you had with, the faith community. Was it always something that was a part of your life, or was it something you chose as an adult, or was it something that you feel like you were born into and just sort of had to agree with? And those kind of questions, again, they can be very neutral. You can provide them in a way that gives people options, but I want to try to make clear what's going on in the background that people might not be aware of at all. Same way
Mhm.
we're working with trauma or interpersonal abuse. So many of those things limit us from uh, connecting with our own voices, our own experiences. It just
Mhm.
becomes this norm that we're surviving all the time. So
Yeah.
anytime you can provide a little bit of like a glimpse of what else is out there or a glimpse of possibilities for the client, I think
Mhm.
that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And then confusion, often people come to me and they're talking about people's actions and words that don't line up. So they're talking a lot about people's intent, or, I know they didn't mean this, but, or, I'm really struggling with like this kind of decision, or like I'm doing everything right, but these people don't really seem to be happy with me and I don't really understand it. Those kinds of things I think show up, especially when somebody's in a mission driven workplace, is kind of how
Mhm.
I think of it, where an organization that's like, hey, we have a positive mission, we're trying to help those in need, or we're trying to provide clinical services to a population, like anything that looks good on paper, I'm always a little bit suspicious of. I think this is because it's my training and my experience. um, but I'm always more suspicious of a workplace that's like, we're here for you to do good, than a workplace that's like, we're here for you to make money and we make money and you get to just like leave at 5 and
Uh-huh.
we're good. Anything that's like asking for extra time, or, is saying like, oh, we can't pay you that much. Like, how dare you ask for, a raise? Like, the good work we're trying to do here.
Mhm.
uh, those sort of workplaces tend to cause a lot of confusion in the people that work for them, because they're like, hey, I was promised this, leadership role. I've been doing it all. Like, why am I not getting my leadership position? And they're told like, oh, you need to be more humble, or you need to be more patient, or you need to wait for, the authority to decide you're really ready. We don't even think you're ready because you're asking for more. How dare you?
Mm. Yikes. Yeah, so
That
like
happens a lot.
all the least healthy parts of the least healthy nonprofits.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People,
combined with like some dogma that can often like tell you like I end up working with some therapists a lot who have a lot of stuff around money that's attached to how they grew up in their Christian religion, about how like kind of like money is for bad people basically, and they have to work through charging fees for therapy because they really truly believe that, like, what is it, there's a term they use, I'm not religious so I don't,
yeah, like
and
money is the root of all
yeah,
evil,
that's
right?
the
It's
one.
harder for like a rich man, or it's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven. Like,
Yes,
those are
yes.
very common phrases that
Yeah,
teach us something about like,
absolutely. And like when you've had that internalized your whole life, it's really hard to like set a fee or ask for a raise, or because then you're basically raising your hand and saying like, I'm willing to be a bad person for money.
Mhm.
And that's, I mean, obviously not what's actually happening, but it's the interpretation that you fear others will make. It's the interpretation you may be making on some level, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard for our clients too. Like sometimes religion gets in the way of your well-being now because
Mhm.
some people's interpretation of it is that, hey, nothing in this life really matters. Like the only thing that matters is, the afterlife. And therefore, we're okay with asking you to work 12-hour days, 5 days a week, and paying you for, you know, 40 hours. Like because we have this greater mission.
Hmm.
But so many people who've worked for churches or religious universities or any kind of mission organization, anything that's sort of centered around faith, I always am like a little bit more on high alert for workplace abuse or relational dynamics that just get really messy. Like even
Mhm.
if everybody has good intentions, a lack of boundaries
Yeah.
or a lack of a clear job description
Hmm.
can cause a lot of mess and emotional manipulation. Some people's religious workplaces provide housing, right? And if you're trying to think of like, hey, if I leave this job, I have to go find a place to live in all of these areas where there's not a lot of places to live, where they're so expensive,
Hmm.
those kinds of barriers keep people from actually assessing what's going on and what they could do about it
Hmm.
when they don't really feel like they have any other options, or the other options would cost them so much more than the price they're paying right now, the pain and suffering. Like they're tolerating it, they're coming to you, but they're mostly surviving in this place. And part of our work is to help people learn how they can prioritize their needs and maybe start creating a path to an exit plan, or start thinking about creating a path to an exit plan, like depending on how far back you need to stay or you need to
Hmm.
start to stay with the client. It can be a long process.
Yeah.
Or you might have a client that's like, hey, I have one session and I'm going to burn my life down, by the next time I see you. And like
Uh-huh.
they come back in for their second session and they're like, I changed everything. And then you get to work through some of the hardships of that kind of process too, when people like, get to the place where they're going to bolt.
Yeah. And can we talk some about that process for people, like starting from the place of they've decided to leave a religion and maybe their entire community is within that religion, like everybody, their family, their friends, their workplace. Can we talk some about how you help people rebuild pretty much their entire life once they've made the very brave decision for themselves to leave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I even the way you phrased it, I don't think people often decide to leave their religion. I think
Mm.
sometimes they find it happening to them. But they're
Oh.
like, I took these beliefs so seriously and they led me out the door because I saw that, what we were saying we were practicing is not always what we're actually practicing. So I think there's a lot of grief in feeling like this is happening to me. It's not something where I woke up and I was like, I think my life would be better outside of religion. It's like, I can't stay in this anymore. It's causing me so much pain, so much physical distress that I physically can't keep going. But I know that it's going to cost me, what feels like at the moment, so much more. And
Hmm.
I know that people are going to tell me once I leave, oh, you never really were a believer anyway. And that is such a painful and terrifying thing to know your community is going to say to you, when often the people that I work with were the most committed. They dedicated their lives to, service, to faith, to leading in these communities. And they don't feel like they ever chose to leave or would have chosen to leave.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like there is maybe an announcement at some point, but it's like way down the line from when they had
Yeah.
been kind of internally leaving or internally pushed out
Yes.
even.
Right. And usually that takes a long time. Usually that's a sign of healing, I think, when people are willing to be a little bit more open about their experience or tell their story, or to, even like unfriend some people or like even mute them on Instagram from
Mm-hmm.
their old life. I'm like, okay, we're taking some steps to like the life after a rebuilding. But when you meet people who are at that really early stage where all of the like the stained glass is just cracking, that's how I
Uh-huh.
think of it. Like all these little pieces are, once made up this whole like picture of faith and life and beliefs and, personal practices or personal beliefs. And then all of a sudden there's all these like pieces missing. It might take a while before the whole thing finally shatters or before people even notice.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much anxiety and fear baked into that early part of the process. I feel like a lot of what you're doing at those really early clinical stages is just helping people learn how to cope.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a lot of people, religion is a coping skill, right? It's a way to
Yeah.
make sense of the hard parts of the world. It's a way to like find goodness and to know you're a good person or to like have some ideas of how to be a good person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so losing that can feel like you just lost anything that regulates you. So some of that work is just helping people find what else they can do to regulate their bodies, to learn to befriend themselves, to be kind to themselves. So anything that you can do along that process personally is really helpful. And then the second thing I think of is like giving people some connection to a community of other people that have left.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those communities are really messy. I mean, obviously, often they're really messy. I assume any community of people
Mm-hmm.
who like have had a hard time in life or are struggling, like sometimes people have really dysfunctional behaviors that they bring with them.
Yeah.
So I don't always push people into, groups, but even something as simple as a Facebook group or, maybe somebody doesn't want to engage personally yet, but there are some creators that they can follow
Mm-hmm.
or there's something where they can start getting new information that a life after this religious group is possible.
Yes. Yeah, it makes them feel so much less alone in a
Yes.
time when they probably feel very alone.
Mhm. Trauma is isolating, deconstruction is isolating, like any
Grief.
kind of grief is
Mm-hmm.
so isolating. So anytime we can get people a little connected with the idea of other people or other people can sometimes start to make a difference in
Mm-hmm.
those like really early stages of like just complete chaos.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like clinicians minimize how intense this experience is. Like, oh, you're just leaving church or, you just left a job. But especially for people who were raised in these religious groups, I was raised in one of them and it impacted, not only my social life, but also my education. I was homeschooled, really separated from, a lot of other experiences, was raised like without much access to pop culture, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things that are incredibly disorienting about stepping a foot in the broader world or the world outside your tiny little bubble of a high control group or a high control religion or a very totalizing space. So I also think like in some ways our clients at this stage are like they're like little kids and sometimes they rebel and go all in and start like doing things you're like whoa, that's probably not good for you either. Right, like
Mm-hmm.
the answer to purity culture is not like promiscuity, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to be mutually satisfying kind of interactions that you have. The
Mm-hmm.
answer to purity culture is to figure out what do you want your sexual expression and experience and identity to be? What
Mm-hmm.
values do you want to bring forward? How and what feels good for you when? And
Yeah.
that's very different. And that might still involve somebody choosing their own like guidelines or, preferences around sexual behavior or dating or relationships. Um, but it's not going to be just like the world like diving in is not always better for clients. But
Mm-hmm.
no, if they do, like that's a part of the process and that's a normal thing that can happen. And again, your job is to just be that steady force, curiosity, support for your clients, helping them ground and really letting them know like, yeah, that's normal or that's like, yeah, that's the way a lot of people experience like life outside of the box for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. And it can also be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way that like maybe somebody not raised in a high control group or religion might have experimented with some of those things in adolescence and the early 20s or something like that, versus like, I gotta get it all in now. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna go off the deep end. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And like I can understand why you make up for some lost time there, but also, like you said, it's not necessarily the most mutually beneficial way to go about it, and certainly
Right.
not going to be the most mutually pleasurable, because
Right.
yeah.
Or same thing with substances. Like, if
Mhm.
people are like, these substances but has been off limit for my religion, like they're more prone to overuse because they haven't learned some of the other ways why, here's some other reasons why substances can be harmful, rather
Mhm.
than just like religious beliefs. Like I think about
Right.
alcohol, especially, like a lot of people grew up in environments where alcohol is not allowed at all, or just like, only in like ritual kind of ways. And then they enter the world of freedom, and there are plenty of other reasons why alcohol is not good for you,
Right.
and
Right.
not good for a lot of ways that people use it a lot of the time. And I think that can be hard for some people, as they're like, wait, I thought, I was told everything in the world was bad, but now you're here telling me like also some of the things in the world can still be harmful, even if they're all like available to you as a, adult free of religious group.
Mhm. Yeah. And I wonder too if some of that pendulum swing, like with promiscuity, for instance, there's kind of an embracing of like, I'm being bad. Like, I'm just going to be bad and
Mm-hmm.
see what it feels like, versus the scary intimacy of being in a relationship for the first time, maybe with a sexual component, and the
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability therein, and the battling of like, I always was told this was wrong before marriage, for instance, but
Yeah.
like I want to do this and we're here together. Like, it's a different, it's a much riskier emotional behavior, really,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, than
Yeah.
sleeping with every guy at the bar. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
that one's risky too, but like it feels far more vulnerable. Um,
Yes.
and you have to grapple with the guilt that might still live inside you, instead of just like throwing it at the wall, like I'm gonna be bad.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that brings up this idea for me of like relationships, and in high control groups or religions, there's all these relationship structures that are built in, from
mhm,
everything to, you know, dating or courtship or marriage to friendship. So that's something that I think a lot of people
mhm,
struggle with when I first see them, is they're like, I used to be able to just like go to church and I would make friends. Like if you move somewhere and you join the branch of your church there, like people are going to be welcoming, they're going to be excited, they're going to be like, oh, have you seen this place? Have you taken your kids to this playground? Like, do you know that like on Tuesdays, like this store always has these things on sale? Like the really important parts of being in a community.
mhm.
And it can feel like you have all these instant friendships. And then when you get into a context where that's not happening, it can feel like you're inadequate. So a lot of people that I talk to have struggles with friendship, and they're like, why is friendship so hard? Like I really miss the like super intense bonding that I used to get from, just going to church. Like, yeah, there were places where I couldn't show up fully, but like I knew I could show up and people would care for me if I had a need
Mhm.
in these really practical ways. That's
Yeah.
really hard to lose, and that's hard to rebuild when you're used to it.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. So I guess there's some
sometimes
like how to make friends as an adult kind of training that ends up needing to happen in therapy.
absolutely. Yeah. And to normalize that that takes time, and that it can feel a little clunky, and that you can get through some of those early disconnects of, um, you know, misunderstandings or miscommunications or somebody having to cancel, right? Those like early relational withdrawals that can
Mhm.
happen, that those are normal, and those don't mean there's anything wrong with you or anything wrong with the other person, because often they get overblown really early.
Right.
And then one other thing that I always make explicit is like, your relationships used to be based on sameness. They used to only happen around like religious beliefs all being the same, like lifestyle being the same, values being the same. And now out in the world, like you're going to have to contend with people having different values or preferences, and start recognizing that those are just as valid as yours. There might be
Mhm.
ways where you're like, hey, I can't really stay friends with this person because, they don't have as much availability to hang out as I do. That's a normal and fine thing. That doesn't mean anybody's broken or wrong or doesn't like you. That's just sort of a part of life in a world where people have a lot of different priorities and preferences.
Yeah. And I'm
And
thinking
the
about,
world's not going to match you the way that you used to be matched.
right. And before, when friendship was so easy to come by, it's easy to feel a desperation, which is naturally fairly repulsive to people when you're
Yes.
like trying to build those relationships.
Right.
Um, and that's probably part of why it hurts so much if somebody cancels last minute or something. It's easier to take it personally, because you really had to work hard to build this, to get this one thing on the books, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you have all this other time because you're no longer like engaging in the hours and hours of religious practice or family closeness that maybe you used to have, or all these like Christian workplaces or mission driven workplaces. Like they'll take up all your time, right? Like you'll work till
Hmm.
7 and then there'll be a family quote unquote dinner after,
Hmm.
or you'll show up early, or your lunch breaks will be with your coworkers. And when you leave some of those places, you have all this time, and that's very disorienting when you used to have maybe a lot more structure in your life or a lot more planned activities. So I
Hmm.
always encourage people to, don't overfill their schedules because it's
Hmm.
easy to just sort of jump into a new community of like, now I'm doing yoga 6 days a week and all of my friends are in the same like yoga community and like we're gonna go do this training and
Yeah.
like Tulum. But like if that's working for you, that's fine. But it's also like make sure that people are also like giving some space to work through some of their hard feelings, that they're actually building practices that will sustain their well-being in their life, because
Hmm.
they really might not have had any opportunity to develop tolerance for relationships or vulnerability or um, change because their community didn't give them that when they were growing up.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking we have a CE that's all about the overlap between purity culture and diet culture,
Ooh,
and just
awesome.
thinking about these high control religions and how they really do exert control over basically everything. And so there's just a
Yeah.
lot that folks aren't exposed to about the outside world that can feel scary, exciting, both. Like, can just, I'm imagining going out into a world that I thought was one way and I'm realizing now is a different way, and feeling unprepared and feeling just kind of like I'm thinking about like a newborn deer learning to walk, like there's a real vulnerability there, um, to end up separating from the people in your life that want to keep you in one box that no longer fits you. Um, I mean, I'm thinking about families particularly. How do you help people maintain relationships with their families if their families feel very strongly that they're doing the wrong thing by leaving?
That one is so tricky and so depends on the family and how
Mhm.
much room they have to grow. I mean, we know that families can change, that family systems can change. We also know the power of homeostasis and, you know, relationships kind of like want to stay locked in a
Mhm.
certain way. And often one person leaving the faith, they're treated like you're leaving the family.
Mhm.
And that can be really tricky. So I do a lot with people trying to build practices of safety when they engage with their family. Most
Mhm.
people want to stay in relationship with their family, and most families can tolerate some relational connection or interaction. Some people choose to go fully no contact with certain family members or with their entire family. And I always respect that because that's a valid choice for people to make. I'll guide people if that in that direction if that's where they feel like they ultimately need to go. But
Mhm.
most people want to stay connected with their family. So some of the work we do is around recognizing that your family might not ever understand or get you. And
Mhm.
that if you're seeking validation or like you would be okay if your parents finally said, like, we understand you and we support you, like that's too much power to put in their hands. Like your well being has to stay in your hands.
Yeah.
But if there are some places where you can go and share a meal together, or if you can have a conversation where, you say like, Mom, I don't want to pray, but I'm okay sitting here if you want to pray. Um, those can be really powerful, like little nuggets to figure out like how much can your family tolerate about your difference. And
Mhm.
my hope is always that families can expand and renegotiate and change and grow. But sometimes it really is on the client to hold the limits and to leave situations, as soon as possible if they feel like unwell. So at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, you might need to figure out a different place to stay than your family's home if you're going to go for, a holiday. Let's start saving up now or figure out like
Mhm.
what is in your capacity. Can you stay with anybody else? Just so that your body isn't in a place where you feel like you can't escape from.
Right.
Even if that's not true, like nobody's holding you hostage, but your
Mhm.
body can feel like it gets locked up into those same patterns of power and control that were present earlier in your life.
Yeah.
And then I work a lot with people on tolerating difference and recognizing like their family might not ever change.
Mhm.
And how do you learn to live in a world where they're not in charge of you, but also you're not in charge of them?
Yeah. Yeah. That there doesn't have to be any convincing on either side.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There might be other practices that are more helpful. So sometimes people are like, what do I do when my family members start saying like anti-LGBTQ things, right? At the dinner table. So I talk through options. Like, I don't know, one of the first one is like stand up and walk away. Like remind your body that you don't have to sit there in a harmful situation or where people are talking casually about harm towards you or people you love or people that you really care about and want to flourish in the world. So like excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, like go get a drink of water, like do something to move your body physically out of that space. And then
Mhm.
you're immediately more likely to sort of know what you want to do next.
Yeah.
Sometimes I encourage people to make a game out of it. Dr. Marlene Winnell, who really developed this idea of religious trauma syndrome, she talks about sort of observing your family as an anthropologist. If you can make it playful, like, wow, I'm here with the leprechaun people, and they're all believing in the leprechaun, and they're all praying to the leprechaun, and here I am, just an observer of that. Like that also can create enough distance and playfulness that sometimes that regulates you, even to the point where you can say, like, hey, I'm no longer a part of this, but I see this as really good, or it's even if it's not good, it's what these people have chosen, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna just allow them to live this way and not try to control or change it.
Mhm.
You can also do a secret game where you're like, hey, every time Uncle so and so says something racist, like that's more money that I'm gonna donate to my local like mutual aid group, or I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna make sure that Trans Lifeline gets some extra money when I have to hear all these like anti-trans sentiments around the table. Like there's ways that you can take action in your life and be empowered that don't involve like changing the person in front of you and their views. Like maybe
Mhm.
you have to sort of reinforce your own views, or we encourage our clients to like be active participants in their lives and communities. Like there might be other ways that they can contribute to the well-being of other people,
Mhm.
even while maybe they're not changing some of these harmful views or votes or perspectives on people outside that religious group.
Yeah. And I think like for some people, for some clients, it probably might be like throwing the baby out with the bathwater might be the knee-jerk reaction because that's a lot to manage.
Yeah.
Everything you just described, like it's doable, but I would imagine like especially right after announcing that you're leaving or right after like people have found out that you have like you're not going back to
Yeah.
church, that having that level of maturity and strength
Mm-hmm.
and resolve in yourself and your new beliefs. It would take a
Yeah.
lot to like go to
It's a lot.
Thanksgiving with the fam if that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so creating contingency plans can be a part of therapy, or helping clients work through the grief of choosing to set a boundary and not go this year.
Mhm.
And the panic that can instill, the guilt that can show up if somebody's,
Mhm.
really taking a step away from the family group or expectations. Like those things are really hard to sit with, but
Yeah.
our offices might be some of the only places that clients really can sit with that. They don't have a new community yet. And their old community is like, hey, you can resolve this by just, going to church with your family when you visit. Like, why can't you just get through with it? Or like, why can't you just
Mhm.
deal with it? Then our offices might be really like important places of relief and space to process and ways to start like imagining and building a better life for themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm imagining like any of us, what's the name of the effect? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? I could be naming this wrong, but when, you get a red car, now all you see is red cars,
Yeah.
right? It might be that as you recognize that there are these other places to meet people, like there could be the positive effect of it within your new community or area or awakening space or whatever post oppressive religion, that you can start realizing that there are things out there you didn't even see before that could be really great fits for you. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
imagining that like therapists helping people find that as a part of that plan you're talking about could be really important, because
Yeah.
we all, we get our blinders on sometimes about what's available in life and what's available around us in a way that probably isn't helpful to any of us in any
Yeah.
context.
Right. And growing up, like in these high control groups or in really isolated kinds of experiences in childhood, like I think it's really hard to even imagine a client who has so little exposure to the world and to the possibilities and to the other places that you can like work and serve and the other ways that you can be a good person and find
Hmm.
meaningful life and community involvement outside of religion. And a lot of it might just be researching options for your client. Hey, let's sit here and
Hmm.
let's look up some other non-religious groups that meet, for other activities that you might enjoy doing. That can be something that happens in the therapy room because it's too overwhelming for the client to do on their own. There can be
Hmm.
a lot of attachment and developmental issues or challenges around people who have maybe they're second or third generation in their religion.
Hmm.
Maybe they were, born into it and their parents chose it. Or maybe they got sucked into a high control group as an adult trying to find meaning or connection. And each of those experiences can have challenges that show up in the lifespan or the ways that people have can developmentally engage in the world as adults.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you find that it's like a harder job to help people kind of find themselves? If, and this is an assumption I'm making, that it would be harder if it's, their whole entire life, like they were raised in this religion versus I can also see the difficulty of like at 23, you found something that made the world make sense and
Yeah.
now it no longer fits. Like is one group harder to kind of find themselves and assert themselves than another?
I think for people who were raised in a high control religion or in a harmful religious environment, that's always harder because it's had so many more developmental impacts
Hmm.
or early attachment impacts. Um, there's challenges with being in a high control group or leaving a kind of cult like group or organization or business as an adult. But if you have some other context for life before,
Hmm.
that's an anchor. That's
Right.
something that people can draw from, where when it has been pervasive in your entire experience of the world, I think that is usually it's a little bit longer of a
Hmm.
process just because there's more to learn and there's less to draw on. I mean, there's always places where people, I believe, have like stood for their beliefs or values along the way that they get to take with them, even when they leave religion. I think of like my passion for like truth, justice, love. Like those are all things that I could say I got from my religious upbringing.
Hmm.
But they're also things that I live out in a very different way than the expectations of the people who kind of shaped my early religious experience. And the same is true for probably a lot of your clients. It's like you there will be themes where they've always been the person who asked questions, or they've always been somebody who protected something or believed something a little bit different, and we can use those stories to help boost like their ability to have courage to go make new relationships now, or
Hmm.
their ability to sort of think through something, or even just stop thinking and enjoy a little bit of life, because there's like so much thinking in so many of these people and so many of the groups that they come from. Like they really had a lot of control over their mind, and there can be a lot of like trying to figure out what's new or what's good now rather than like letting it unfold or treating it as like probably a lifelong process of, you know, developing our values and learning how to apply them in the situations that happen.
Mhm.
So sometimes we can tell our clients like there's not just like one new belief that you need to just like figure out and then you'll have like a new system. If they're doing that, they're probably like, it's called cult hopping.
Mhm.
And it's something that there's some research on where if people have been in one high control group, they might be more likely to end up in another one because they're still looking for some of the things that feel the same as that
Right.
structure and that authority and that surety of
Mhm.
belief and practice.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, like excluding the cult hoppers, do you find that most of your clients kind of reject religion altogether for a while, or do they tend to go to a religion that is less controlling, that still has some of the tenets of their original religion, but without some of the high control?
It's a mix. So that's why I think it's really tricky as a clinician is
Hmm.
you might be engaging with people who still want to find some new evolution or some new practice that feels kind of similar. And
Hmm.
that can be a little bit scary or unnerving for a clinician. It's sort of like, hey, are you getting into another harmful place?
Right.
Or, you know, usually we have to manage our own anxieties around that. But there's also a lot of possibility for people to make all sorts of new meaning after harm.
Hmm.
And you know, I think it's really important as a clinician to stay neutral on that or to be very explicit about your bias. Like if you are doing work that helps people get from one place to another, please be open about that because if you have a hidden agenda, that's going to interfere with the client's ability to choose their own.
Yeah.
But I'm very clear, like I help people find a secular or religious path forward. Like there are so many options for you. And
Hmm.
I think it's really important that we let clients explore those options and then know that they might choose one that we wouldn't, or
Hmm.
know that they might, you know, do something new that feels right for them. Like our job is to help them, you know, stay on top of their symptoms, make sure we're managing all the clinical issues, and then help them find that new meaning and trust themselves to explore and believe and relate in healthier ways.
Yeah. And the folks who do cult hop, do they usually, if it's pointed out by a clinician, I'm curious how this feels similar and different from where you just left. Is it a quicker, easier extraction because they haven't been in it super long? Or is there like another big loss because they really thought this was going to be deliverance, essentially?
Yeah, I can see both things happening for like just as frequently. I don't think they lean one or the other. Again,
Hmm.
once you start building some ideas of like, you know, other coping skills and like some sense of safety in your life and some sense of like your values and where they're actually taking you, that can feel easier to leave a harmful group again to be like, oh, wait, I thought this was it. Nope, not it. I'm gonna pivot.
Hmm.
Um, or it can feel like it's that compounding sense of grief and loss that like, oh, not even this place. Like I had such high hopes for this one. I
Hmm.
almost see that more in organizations or workplaces. Like, oh, I thought this workplace would be different. Like
Hmm.
I had a bad experience there, but I thought it was just, you know, that org or, you know, that leader. But the same patterns can repeat in different workplaces across, you know, different perspectives. Um, so I see people like leaving organizations and then because maybe their training or their work history keeps them in ministry,
Hmm.
or keeps them in, you know, religious higher ed, and those kinds of pivots are harder to make like out of those industries. It's easier to just find a new church and say like, oh, maybe if I work at this one this thing won't happen. um I hope it doesn't, but like if it does, you know, we'll know how to deal with it. Like you've
Yeah.
already gotten out of one bad situation, like you've already done the hardest part, which is like leaving that first group or making a big change at some point in your life. Like that should give people some of the power or courage or resources when they need to do that again.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm curious about things that I wouldn't think of because I haven't worked with a lot of clients who've been through this. Like what's some of the fallout that I might not have on my radar as a therapist, um or some things I might miss in asking about their experience.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up sometimes is that often we have this idea that like religious harm involves like sexual abuse by a ministry leader or a pastor or a priest. So sometimes there's comparison where people will say like, well, that didn't happen to me, so how could I have had
Mm,
religious harm? Like these worst things didn't happen to me. Like I didn't go through a church split that was really painful, or I didn't experience like all the worst that can happen. And especially since we have so much content about this area, there's a lot of people talking about the worst stuff.
mhm.
And so it can creep in that like, well, I must not really have had a bad experience if like these things didn't happen to me. Or we might bring that bias in as clinicians, like, hey, you wouldn't believe the stories I've heard. Like you're here having
Right.
a hard time about this. Like that can happen. We hear really hard stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but remembering that each person's experience is valid to them, and that we can believe them, and that sometimes ideas are just as harmful as like specific instances of like abuse or harm.
Mhm.
There can be pervasive ideas or beliefs that are part of that religion. I think a lot about like identity related. So like if you're a woman, you don't have a voice in this religious community. Like you can't be a leader. You have to be, protected or under some sort of authority. Or LGBTQIA identity. Like you have to hide this. And if this ever came out, like maybe some people would accept you, or we'd accept you to a point, but we wouldn't like fully accept you and you're flourishing in the world and your relationships.
Mhm.
Like those things can cause just as much harm as overt acts of abuse.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for clients to minimize what they've experienced. And I'm like, you're sitting here with all of the symptoms. Let's go through the list. Like, how does it feel that these experiences match up with complex PTSD, or they match up with an anxiety disorder? How do these kind of diagnoses feel, even as some of your experience has made you think like, oh, I'm okay, all the worst things didn't happen to me. Like there can be a lot of harm that's not some of the worst or most trauma inducing things that we hear about.
Mhm.
So it's easy to miss because clients are like, oh yeah, I went to church but it was like fine. and
Mhm.
and maybe that's true. I think for a lot of people that's true, but that might be sort of a defense mechanism because that part of their story feels too tender or too vulnerable or too dismissed
Mhm.
to even bring up with a clinician. So I wonder if there's things that
Right.
you like might miss because you take clients at their word, even while they're showing symptoms of religious harm or
Mm.
of, something about their upbringing. Like so many people are like, my family was great, they weren't that bad. And then like on the sixth session with them, they're like, oh, and all of these things happened. You finally get
Right.
like the real story.
Right. And I think about kind of the tender balance. I'm thinking about a client I had who was of a high, she was in and wanted to remain in a high control religion. And as an eating disorder therapist, like we were working on her eating disorder behaviors, which were also rooted in purity culture and wearing pantyhose 24/7 and always keeping your arms covered, even on a hot day. And like trying to balance the part of me that knows how desperately uncomfortable pantyhose is all day, even when you're by yourself at your house,
Wow.
and like really wanting to free her from that, but also knowing like that was not her interest based on her religion. And not wanting to assume that my thought pattern was the right thought pattern around it and being delicate with it because she really did strongly identify as a member of her religion and it was extremely important to her, and honoring that as a therapist while also wanting to be like, wear a t-shirt. Your arms are okay
Yeah.
to be seen and it's like so hot outside. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so hard. I think that's some of the like hardest part of this work that we didn't get trained in super well is like
Mhm.
how to just sit there and tolerate someone being so different from us or
Right.
having such different values or practices that it's like it can be really hard to even tolerate.
Absolutely. And like, I love this one. Like, I really loved working with her. I just thought she was an amazing woman and just wanting
Yeah.
freedom for her so desperately. And acknowledging internally that like my version of freedom was a different version of freedom than what she was looking for.
Yeah.
And, that part of me, that hoping that she would find that after our work together, but wasn't happening during our time together. So accepting
Yeah.
that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else you want to tell therapists who are probably encountering some of these clients in their practice, even though it's not their specialty?
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is beware of becoming a new guru yourself,
Ooh.
especially for those of us who have like educational platforms or are creating content around these specialties, or our own ideas of like how to support people outside of just one-on-one clinical work. It can really be easy and exciting to have somebody who shows up like so willing to hear your opinions and to find out about how you did things. And that can feel really like exciting in a way that I want us to be a little suspicious of, because
Mhm.
people who leave high control religions or who grew up in like structures where they are told what to do, they are the best clients. Like, they take things so seriously, they're delightful to work with. But it's really easy when you have good rapport with somebody, and if your clinical training or theory allows you to be more open or to self-disclose in an ethical way more, it can be really easy to slip into some of those patterns
Mhm.
where the client takes your view of things rather than you creating space for them to listen to their own voice about things.
Right. That's such a
Yeah,
good point. Yeah.
because we want to be leaders, we like want to share our knowledge, we're excited about all the things that we have to offer as clinically
Mhm.
trained people in the world. And it can really easily create a challenging dynamic or something that ends up getting in the client's way and your own way, probably long term, if there's some
Mhm.
sort of fracture or some sort of thing that gets missed or unsaid, or you start becoming the new person that's influencing the client's life and their choices more than they are.
Right. Yeah. Our job's to put ourselves out of a job with each client,
Yeah.
not to have them continually reliant upon us and
Yeah.
not learning to listen to themselves. That's a great point. Awesome. Well, Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. I really hope that people feel better prepared going into conversations with clients about their religious upbringing, about how it impacts them now, about like how they're managing their, you know, finding of themselves and listening to their own voices. It's really important. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I hope that broadened your clinical horizons. Head over to notboringces.com to get your CE credit. Want to have a not boring conversation with me about your clinical area of expertise? You can apply there too. If you like this conversation, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and be sure to subscribe for future conversations.